Hello everyone, welcome to the Consistently OK podcast. My name's Luke and I'm here as always with Nick.
Hello there.
And we're presenting you with a bi-weekly pod centered around pop culture that we do our very best to make consistently okay just for you. Each month we give you one episode where we dive into something such as a film, TV show, game or comic, and we break down our thoughts and more on it. Our second monthly episode will be part of our in-depth series, and this season we're focusing on Batman from films to animation, where we'll take you on a journey through the highs and lows, ins and outs of the representation of Batman through the years. This week's episode is sponsored by Harvey Vehicle Contracts. Harvey Vehicle Contracts is a friendly family-run car dealership based in Warwickshire. HVC was established in 1984 and they have many years of experience selling top quality new and used cars in Stratford-upon-Avon. Handpicking each and every car that they sell using 30 years of industry experience to ensure that they not only stock the best quality cars, but they also come in fantastic condition. You can find them at www.harveyvehiclecontracts.com. We could check out an up-to-date stock list, make appointments for test drives and more. That's www.harveyvehiclecontracts.com. All right, Nick. So our in-depth series starts here with Batman, the first Batman film from Tim Burton, which was in 1989. And we're going to basically do an episode once a month, focused on Batman, mainly focusing on the films, of course, but we're going to throw in some animation, a little bit of comics. And the ultimate goal here is to end this run with the Batman released in March 2022.
Yes.
Which we're very excited about.
Yes, I'm praying they don't delay it.
Praying, otherwise this is all just pointless and we may as well just stop now. But fingers crossed, things seem to be heading on the right track.
Yeah.
So the idea behind these is that both of us are going to sit down and we'll have guests along the way as well who are going to join us for various other episodes with the Batman series in mind. And we're going to watch the film and we're going to discuss it on the podcast. So for instance, you and I both recently watched Batman. I keep calling it Batman 1989. I don't know if that's actually...
I think the shorthand for it is Batman 89. Because that's the comic, right? The comic is called Batman.
Yeah, it is, yeah. But obviously on the actual film is called Batman, isn't it? So that's... I've been calling it Batman 1989, so I've been doing this really long version for no reason. But we're gonna go into it. So we're going to talk about things like the narrative, casting, cinematography, things like that. So some of it may be super in-depth. Some of it depends what we're both thinking about, really. But, I mean, I love this film. It's... rewatching it again was a bit of a throwback. So I feel like I saw it a lot when I was growing up, basically throughout the years as a comic book fan. But there's definitely been a huge chunk of time that's gone by that I haven't actually sat down and watched it. And I feel like we've been just drowning in superhero films since I probably last saw it. So it was awesome. It was awesome to go back and watch it. Should we just do what we normally do and just dive on in?
Yeah, I think let's dive right in. Do we want to break this up into... We have a brief now. This is how...
We do have a brief. This is how we're professional. Consistently AK podcast is moving up.
Yeah. So do we want to break this up into the brief in terms of... We have 3 core areas that we're going to talk about for the in-depth series.
Let's do that.
Okay, so we have 3 areas. So the first one is focusing on visual representation. So we're going to talk about cinematography, costume design, framing of shots, that kind of thing. Yeah. The second area that we'll go to will be narrative, and we'll focus on craft story, character arc, source, and inspiration.
Yep.
And the final one, although we'll probably end up mixing these because that's our fashion, will be casting crews. We're going to talk about like casting, director, composer, all that kind of stuff. But be prepared that we will go off book because...
We'll probably start exactly with, I'll do a little bit of the casting and then I'll go into the first point and then I'll end up there. But before we do go into this, if you haven't seen Batman 89, as I have been told it is called, there are spoilers. So if you are just listening to this purely because you enjoy our voices, and you may go and watch Batman just because our voices guide you towards that film, then there are going to be spoilers. We're going to ruin everything. And we also swear. I swear a lot. So if you're young, then there's going to be swearing.
Yeah,
so
be warned.
Look forward to that as well.
Yeah,
I swear for no reason. Anyway, so Batman, do you want to start us off? Or shall I just do a brief background on the film for people who don't know?
Yeah, give the brief background.
Give it the brief. So it came out in 1989, which is many years ago now, from Warner Brothers. I'm pretty sure it was Warner Brothers.
Yes.
Yeah, it's Warner Brothers, isn't it? It's Batman is based on a DC comic. It's huge. I mean, if you're listening to this podcast, which is based around pop culture, and you don't know what Batman is, then
That's a good question, actually. I wonder whether there's anybody out there who doesn't know Batman.
I mean, I would say that my 8-month-old baby boy doesn't know who Batman is, but I have taken him down to my den and shown him who Batman is.
Exactly.
So he may have been the only person left that didn't know.
Yeah.
So it's if you don't know who Batman is, then you should know who Batman is. So I'm not going to go into who Batman is and whatnot, but this was a big deal because there was the Batman TV show. There have been plenty of other Batman things that happened before this, but this felt like a Hollywood blockbuster. Although I watched the trailer for this on the extras, and man, the trailer is absolutely shit. But that is
this is a complete side note, and it's only because I did it today. But I was scouring YouTube, as we've talked about before, especially in season 1, where we just go on a YouTube spiral. I landed on a 35mm scan, like 4K scan of the original Spider-Man trailer, the one with like the Twin Towers. That is such a cheesy trailer.
They're all bad though, aren't they? A lot of those trailers.
Yeah, really.
You should go and watch a trailer for Die Hard. That's just insane. It's just it just smacks the words Die Hard. Like every 2 minutes, it's like Die Hard, and then it's just a bit of this, John McClane, and then it's Die Hard. Anyway, we've already sidetracked, so we're letting everyone down straight away. But anyway, so it's filmed 1989. It had a really strong cast. It had someone, we'll talk about the casting later, of course, but Jack Nicholson, which was a huge name to have, particularly for the role that he plays in it, a Joker. And it had a very obscure choice for Batman and Michael Keaton, so there was a lot of rumblings if it was going to work or not. But anyway, came out, big blockbuster, big success, spawned a sequel out of it and everything. And surprisingly, quite a long film as well. It was 2 hours, just over 2 hours, which, going back to when we said we were going to talk about it, I was really surprised how long it was, because I didn't remember it being that long when I was younger.
Yeah.
Probably because I just bloody loved it. But it was directed by Tim Burton, who at this point Beetlejuice had been out for a little bit, which also had Michael Keaton, and he'd done Pee-wee's Playhouse, I think, was one of his other big films that he had done. So he was relatively young director, and again, huge ask for him to take this on. Obviously he wanted to, but from what I've read, he wasn't actually a massive comic book fan as well. So even more kudos to him for pulling off this. So that's a very, very, very brief background into this film.
A solid background, for sure.
Obviously, the whole reason of this episode is to go in depth into it. So we'll do that as we go along. Yeah. So start us off, Nick. Where do you want to start with this?
I'm going to try to stay on book. I'm going to start with visual representation.
Let's do it.
In terms of one of the things, and I still look back at this now, as much as I love Zack Snyder's Batman and the way that he's portrayed everything about that, I think is perfect. But one thing I don't feel like we've seen enough of so far, because I'm optimistic that they'll give us a Batman series still, is Gotham. I think Gotham in this looks absolutely correct.
Right, it's good, isn't it?
Yeah, just it looks bang on. Like
when actually, my first note is Gotham looks good. That's what it says.
My first note is Gotham looks absolutely correct. So we're on the same page. That's good.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love the way it's like it's adhering to the gothic vibes of it. It's a little bit gritty. It's a little bit kind of seedy.
It's dingy, isn't it?
And I think that's something that I'm definitely going to keep track of as we go through this series. But I feel like it gets lost, especially with Nolan's. I feel like by Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises, in my head, the memory of those is that it's almost like it's just Chicago or Pittsburgh. It doesn't quite feel like Gotham.
This Gotham feels very sort of in the slums. It's like Gotham's this big city, but it's just fucked with corruption.
Yeah,
and there's like everyone knows it's a bad place to be, but a lot of people want to be there still because there's opportunities there. It looks like, but Nolan's Batman is, you're right, it just looks like Chicago. It looks like financial district type thing.
And I don't think it starts that way. I think in Batman Begins, again, we'll get to this, but I do feel like in Batman Begins, that represents Gotham closer to what Burton's done with this kind of film.
Imagine if we just jump straight into the Nolan trilogy all of a sudden, really making a mess of this whole thing. But yeah,
I think that was my first kind of port of call when I started it, because the opening of it feels very much like it just gives you a sense of place, and I think it does that so well. So yeah, I think a good place to start is Gotham itself. And then moving on from that slightly, because the opening scene is kind of the way it's presented, you get introduced to Batman. And I think visually it's really cool. Like it works really well. Looking back, it is slightly cheesy.
Oh, it's so cheesy. That's
Like,
so early in my notes as well. I didn't write cheesy, but I think because we're not going to go through scene for scene, so I could jump ahead a million times. But his first, the first thing you see of Batman, which is actually I really really enjoyed because it's very comic book style, is you see his silhouette on top of the roof.
yeah, it's cool.
So you get the beautiful Gotham City headline at the bottom, and then there's obviously some shit going down in Gotham. Of course, there always is. You hear the screams in the alleyway, and you just see the cowl, and then as he walks away, you get this like eerie shadow. I thought that was a super good shot.
Cool.
But yes, the first time you see him come in, it is cheesy because it's obviously the limitations, isn't it? CGI, wire work, and everything. But it's just, and every time he comes into the shot when he's Batman, it's like cape open, very narrow descent or very narrow uprising.
It's very.
It is cheesy.
It's very Dracula.
It is very Dracula, yeah.
Very Dracula. But I think this leans into kind of what I was going to say next, is that as the film went on with this kind of watch and looking at it, especially in terms of just how it's visually portrayed, it feels very like if the later films with Nolan and what you call it with Zach are grounded, this feels way more theatrical. Like it feels sometimes overly dramatic in that there's a lot of like just the way that people react to things, and again with how the sets are done and like costumes, just everything feels as theatrical as it can. Yep. To the point where I almost feel like if it was translated onto a stage play, like if it was a play, I don't think it would look wrong. I feel like it holds that kind of weird dramatic dun 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 kind of thing.
Well, it's really over the top, isn't it? As well, it is like it's very it is very theatrical. That's a fair point, I think. I mean, just the first two goons, the way they react to just literally this guy dressed as Batman who just descends on them, but he doesn't actually do anything. He just sort of looks at them, and they run for this door. It's just they're panicking for their life. I mean, I've guessed they probably heard rumors, and obviously he suggests that they go and tell everyone about it. But it's not like what's his name? God, who played the Batman in the Nolan trilogy again? Christian Bale. And he's very intimidating, isn't he, as Batman when he comes in? But this guy is just, and obviously he kind of goes down quite quickly. He gets shot several times in this suit, and it's just very dramatic the way he falls and pops up again. But his suit looks cool though, doesn't it? I think.
Yeah, like the costume design is great. It still works, and I'm really excited to see what they do with that in the Flash film. Like whether they change that suit at all, whether they do anything.
It's crazy, isn't it, that he's going to be in that as well, Mike Keaton.
Yeah, it was nice to watch his back and kind of know that they're picking him up with that. Like it provided he does it, because I know there's some ambiguity as to whether he's going to make it or not. But
they have to keep his suit the same. It has to be as. I mean, Christian Bale looked uncomfortable in the Batman suit half the time because he couldn't move, and obviously they changed it up as the trilogy went on. But Mike Keaton looks like he can barely move, doesn't he? He gets his leg up for a few kicks, but he just cannot. You know, if you're a villain and you suss out that he can't turn his head 90 degrees, you're in, aren't you?
The worst example of it, I think, is when he saves Vicki Vale and he like shoots the bat gun.
Yeah.
To climb up a thing, and he looks left to right, and it's like his whole body is just like a wooden.
Yeah, he has to go shoulder, but that's Bale does that in Batman Begins, doesn't he? He has to move his whole body, and Dark Knight, especially in the car park scene. Don't know why I'm talking about the Christopher Nolan trilogy again, but anyway, we're talking about the suit. This is the first time we're talking about any of the Batman suits. But yes, Mike Keaton could barely move in that costume. Interesting note I read about that first scene as well with the two criminals on the rooftop is that that line that when he says, I'm Batman, which is obviously super famous now, that wasn't in the script. He was supposed to say that he is the Knight. That's what he's supposed to say. But he didn't think it sounded right. So he decided to say, I'm Batman. And
I almost think that I'm the Knight works better now that's kind of annoying. I kind of like I don't know. I'm a sucker for Batman when it's in the sense of like him leaning into those kind of
Dark Knight.
lines.
Yeah.
Well, just those kind of lines, like in the Batman trailer. I know we're jumping way ahead now, but in that, you know, he's got.
I think we've clearly established that we are never going to not jump ahead. It's already happened. We promised. We kind of said we weren't going to try and do it, but we did say we were going to do it.
Yeah, we've been upfront.
We've honoured that. So yes, sorry, carry on.
Yeah, the line in that Batman trailer where he kind of says, "I'm vengeance," I think is perfect because it's just.
I mean, you can't say I'm Batman, can he? I mean, how many? Because
I know, yeah, but it sounds.
Christian Bale did it different to how Michael Keaton did it because he kind of yelled it, and obviously there's a lot of fun that's been poked at that since. But
again, I think that's the thing. I think that's where this feels like a stage play, or this feels theatrical in the sense that somebody going, "I'm Batman," is very fucking dramatic, and probably wouldn't happen if, like, you know, as we said, they ground it later on. But I think if you were a superhero in that kind of world and said, "I'm Batman," somebody would be like, cool. Whereas if somebody goes like, "I'm the Knight" or "I'm Vengeance," there's a bit more like ominous, oh shit, I don't know what that means, but fuck.
Yeah, but there would have been a lot of people that probably went into this without having a clue who Batman is. You've got to think about how many people would have gone into this as just a popcorn film and not had any idea who it was. But now with Robert Pattinson being Batman, then everyone knows who Batman is now, don't they? Like we said at the beginning, just obviously there were some younger people that are never ever going to see this, and you know, there are some people that Christian Bale's Batman's the first ever Batman they've ever known, and there are some people that will say Robert Pattinson's going to be the first Batman they've known, or Ben Affleck's the first Batman they've known. So for me, if anyone ever asked, Michael Keaton is the original Batman in my head, not Adam West, like some people would say.
It's probably worrying that because I'm a 90s child that my Batman's probably George Clooney. I mean, he's not my favorite Batman, obviously, because Ben Affleck is, but
he's got the nipples, so
yeah. But I guess growing up, I assumed that George Clooney was just Batman with his bank card.
Bad times, really bad times. For those wondering if we are going to talk about Batman and Robin and Batman Forever, we definitely are. With special guests.
Yes.
Another thing that I liked about the way this was shot and things is we're talking about this now, aren't we? The way it's shot. Did we decide this? We are, of course.
Yeah.
I love some of the art drop, the backgrounds. They're great, aren't they? The way it's you can tell very early on. There's a scene again just after this rooftop scene when Knox first walks in, and there's a shot just behind them, and it just reminds me of Ghostbusters. I mean, actually, the first shot after the Gotham City introduction, when you see the street shot, it literally just looks like it's taken from Ghostbusters. It's probably probably shot on the same backlot. I think, if I remember reading right, that they shot this on a backlot with paintings in the background, but then Batman Returns, which is the sequel to this, and with the same team, they shot all of that inside.
Oh, interesting.
So obviously we haven't rewatched Batman Returns yet, but we'll get there. It'd be interesting to see how different it looks, because I think the paintings they use for this really adds to the way Gotham should be, the way it looks and feels, because it's so dank and dark and like shitty, and it just looks so good, I think. And they've obviously worked very hard to make that look that way. The shots that they do, and there's several of them. There are several times where the paintings actually they move, which I don't know if that was to do with lack of time. I know there was some budget, like they spent more money on this and everything, and I know there were issues towards the end with rewrites. I don't know if it was issues or not, but they did rewrite. What's wrong with me? Why can't I say rewrite? Rewrite some of the ending. But yeah, there were a couple of scenes I noticed that the painting shakes when Vicki Vale goes up with Batman. The background shudders.
Do you reckon that's because they're like utilizing like wire work, and so
it's going to be that, isn't it? It's all. I can't tell you any films that came before this that had a lot of wire work and stuff. I have no idea, but it's definitely up there with one of the first times they tried to do a few things like this, isn't it? Making it look as like Batman is actually grappling on something, shooting up into the sky without having wires actually on him. But I just thought, anyway, that's just a small criticism, but it's overall, I thought there were so many times during this film where that looked great with the painting in the background and the cast moving in front of it and everything. It looked really good.
That definitely like adds to the kind of gothic feeling, and also the, as I've said, like the theatrical vibe to it. I think having like, because that feels like a set then.
Yep.
Which again leans into that kind of play tendency of it's just super theatrical in its representation.
Yeah. It makes it look massive as well, doesn't it? That's the thing.
Yeah,
That's the good thing about this, the way of doing it with the backlot and the paintings, is because it looks like it's such a big scale.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really nice touch. And I think they did really well with it. And it definitely made the film, because there's hardly any daytime scenes, is there? There's not that many.
Yeah, I think there's only a couple. And even then, they still look pretty dark.
Yeah. Because that's the lighting's really good as well throughout it. I think anyway, it really pulls off. It obviously really, you can see between the difference between Batman and Bruce Wayne is that they've obviously specifically chosen to have a lot of darkness on the front of when he's Batman, and he's lit differently when he's Bruce Wayne. And surprisingly, Jack Nicholson's Joker, he's super bright the whole way through. I seem to remember it being a lot darker with him, but obviously, I guess the contrast is that Bruce Wayne's supposed to be a bit more mysterious, and it's a dual personality type thing, whereas Joker he's out there for everyone, basically. But it was it
was cool as well. And like going off of that, because we've been talking about costume as well, in terms of the Joker's costume, that again for me leans into the theatrical side, in that like it looks cool, but there are times where it feels quite over the top.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's just the acting as well, because I kind of realized watching it back, there are a couple of points where his Joker has some really nice sinister moments, but then it's also coupled with almost like Caesar, what's his name? I've forgotten the surname. The guy that played the Joker in Batman 66. Caesar Ramon?
Yeah, Caesar Ramon, yeah.
Yeah. In that it's quite like campy. It's quite over the top theatrical, and it's just an odd representation of the Joker. And I'm not sure whether that's down to story or it's just visual, but there's times where, like I said, where he feels very sinister, and I'm kind of like, this is quite uncomfortable. And then there's other times where it's sort of like, it's a bit much for me.
Isn't that a good Joker though?
I don't know, because I really like the Joker where he's just like, his kind of sinister vibe comes from him just being unpredictable, and it being like, I don't quite know what you're going to do next. Whereas this Joker is sort of like, it's not so much I don't know what you're going to do next. It's more just like, I've always struggled with the dance scene, the one where they come in and do all the paintings and stuff, and also then him on the float, which I'd always like, I completely forgotten about until I watched the film. And I was like, oh god, this is an actual scene. And it's sort of like his dancing and his kind of jigs and it's all just very kind of over the top, which I guess leans into this version, and it matches this kind of representation of him. But it's sort of,
I think at that point you've got to remember that if whatever, I don't know what Jokers came before him other than the Caesar Ramon one in the TV series, but obviously they're trying to find kind of, I guess they want to move a little bit away from it, but it's what people know, isn't it? And also at that point in the comics, I mean, there are some dark versions. Obviously these comics are heavily leaned on certain ones like the Killing Joke and everything like that, but I think it's probably the only way Jack Nicholson could have played it.
Yeah, for sure. I think at the time, I mean, like Dark Knight Returns had probably not long been out, a couple of years maybe, by the time they started rolling on Batman. I think it was like 86, 87.
Yeah, something like
that. So
that.
It was pretty close to it. And obviously since like post Batman 89, you start getting a way more complex version of the Joker in the terms of just how he's represented in different ways. So I do like, I was watching this and kind of thinking it almost makes a nod and adheres to kind of what people have known for the Joker in terms of from the 66 Batman.
Yeah.
And then it crafts a new version of him as well. And it's sort of, it is a balance between the two. I don't think this version of the Joker would work in a current context. Like if you put that version of a Joker in a current Batman film, I'd be a bit like
it wouldn't. But then that's the thing, isn't it? Because you have after you have Jack Nicholson's Joker, what the next Joker was Heath Ledger.
Yeah.
And he turned it on his head, but then you get Jared Leto, who's tried to turn on his head, but then on this recent Snyder cut, you see him, he's kind of taken more of the Heath Ledger Joker with him than anything else. And then there'll be another Joker, won't there, in the future, and it'd be really interesting to see where they go. If they go, they could easily try and go back to something like the Jack Nicholson version, which is this, yes, maybe not as intimidating, but really over the top, like super over the top. Because Heath Ledger's Joker is over the top, but in a very sort of unpredictable way. Everything's very planned, and this Jack Nicholson Joker is just very, very quickly a bit of a loose cannon, isn't he?
Yeah,
doesn't take only takes one little trip in an acid tub and he loses marbles. I actually forgot that mirror scene was from Batman. When he looks in the mirror.
Yeah.
Because I always think about that when I think of The Simpsons as an
episode
with Krusty the Clown.
Yeah,
and he's got like breasts, but
that scene as a visual, I think, is really strong.
Yeah, it is. It's great. I love the way he walks out and he's completely in shadow, so you just see like tattered clothes dangling down.
I thought that was really cool. That looked like a comic book, and that's the kind of thing where I was like, "That's sinister as fuck." That's cool because you're not sure if he's going to kill the guy or if he's just going to walk away.
It's actually more unnerving, isn't it? That he just walks away laughing.
Yeah,
and you see all the tools as well that the guys works on him with, and it's just like, he's going to be messed up.
I really like that version of this kind of Nicholson Joker. It's just then when you get the stuff where he's dancing or he's a mime, that kind of stuff, I was a bit like, okay, sure.
Well, it feels like when you think about we're going way off the brief, Nick.
We're still roughly on visual. So
we're still roughly on visual, but the way he looks, the different segments of him, it's almost like not adverts, but it just feels like you could have cut some of his theatrical things, like the mime thing and things, that you could have just that sort of stuff. You could have cut it, and it wouldn't have really made much of a difference.
Yeah,
but it feels like they've tried to throw him into several different. At this day and age, it would be to sell merchandise, wouldn't it? You would have imagine if there were pop vinyls for this series. There probably are pop vinyls for it, but you'd have these mime characters and this Joker and this beach Joker and this Joker and everything. So, but this has just felt like they tried to cram in a lot of different ways that this Joker could be portrayed. I don't know if that makes sense, but
for sure,
it makes sense in my head.
Yeah,
not great for the audience listening to try and work out what I'm thinking.
I think there is there's a visual identity to his Joker, and I think it is a case of we need to adhere to what's been before, craft something new, but still maintain like a PG rating.
Yes, definitely. That's a good way of saying it.
And I think he really does encapsulate all of that, because there's enough cynicism in there that you're like, oh, I really like that as an adult. And then as a kid, there's probably enough of you to go, oh, he's wacky. He's just kind of fun.
What do you think about it? Like how he obviously his painted face in reality, but how do you feel like now with seeing other Jokers, Leto's Joker, who doesn't wear any white face paint in the Suicide Squad, and then obviously Heath Ledger's Joker, who has it all messed up.
Oh yeah,
I think he does. He's just
white.
He's not. He hasn't got like white face paint on or anything. But obviously, this one is that his same as like Killing Joke in the comic, that his skin is completely bleached, like Harley Quinn as well in the comics as well. Yeah, bleach skin. But he's very, very white, isn't he? In this, like it's clearly obvious that it's paint. It's not. Yeah. They don't hide it at all. I actually didn't enjoy the way it looked with when he's got his normal face skin color. When they've obviously in this they've
like makeup
put makeup on him, but it just looks so strange, which I know it's supposed to, but
it looked odd. I like the scene where he sort of peels that off and you see like a bit of half and half. That's kind of cool. I thought that was
I thought it's cool
visual. I think it suits Tim Burton. I think that's probably what it is. I think it really suits knowing what Tim Burton's visual style is like. I think it matches him perfectly. I don't like now having seen other interpretations of the Joker. I think it's still strong in aspects, but I think there have been versions which are more interesting.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is also the mystery around Joker, which, when we start talking about narrative, I've got quite a bit to say about this version of the Joker, because there's things I like and there's things that I don't like. And I think that sort of goes hand in hand with how he's done. Yeah, I kind of think I fall into that area. How about you?
I mean, I find it really odd. I just find it very strange. I think I said to you yesterday in a message about this film as well, and obviously with the Jack Nicholson Joker as well. I just think, remember when I was younger and I watched it, I was a bit blown away by what he came across as and what he looked like and everything like that. But this time around, I was quite put off by several aspects of the Joker. Maybe it's probably easy to talk about it in the narrative as well. Maybe that's more where I'm leaning into with it. But yeah, it's not as iconic as I remembered it at the time.
I think that's my kind of thing. I think in my head I had a better, like, I've always been of the mind that I've always preferred Batman Returns because it is darker. And I think part of that is possibly because they don't have a villain that's song and dance.
The thing about Batman Returns is, as well, when we talk about Joker and like who's come before him and everything, the Danny DeVito Penguin is so far removed from the Penguin in the TV series.
Yeah.
It's like a completely different take. That Penguin version is effectively what Danny DeVito did with that Penguin is what Heath Ledger did with the Joker, really. He really turned it on his head into something completely different. And that Penguin is, when I was younger, that Penguin was quite scary.
Yeah. Gotcha.
And I think with this Joker, he's just not, he does a lot of shit and he shoots a lot of people, but he's just not, he's not going around slitting people's throats or anything. And that's what I would associate the Joker with now, that kind of horrible, evil streak. Whereas because you said it's trying to be a PG rating, I mean, I'm really glad that we didn't get a Joel Schumacher Joker. That would have been...
Could have been awesome.
It could have been so good. Could have been awful as well.
His casting for villains is perfect. So
yeah, strong cast. Get Arnie in there, you're set.
Honestly.
What else do you want to talk about with the visual? I mean, the one thing I noticed is a shit ton of smoke, Nick.
Yes,
absolutely everywhere. It's just there's just not any scenes outside where there isn't smoke surrounding everyone. It's so much smoke.
They went for it, pyro.
They really did.
The only other two things that I think I had to kind of talk about the visuals was, I still think the Batmobile's cool.
Batmobile's awesome.
I've always thought it's a really cool
design. It's even better in Batman Returns, but it's really cool in this.
I think it's just cool.
And the Batwing.
I completely forgot that was in it. When the Batman rocked up, I was like, fucking hell, they threw that in there.
There it is. Of course they did, because they wanted all the merchandise sales, which is something I'll talk about with the casting with Jack Nicholson. I read up on their contracts and everything. Interesting bit about merchandise with Jack Nicholson.
Like, the Batwing is such a huge thing now as well. Like, I remember when that was rocking up in Nolan stuff, people were like, the Batwing's in it.
Because he had a specifically different vehicle in each one, didn't he? He had the Batmobile, then he had the Batcycle, and then he had the Batwing. But Tim Burton was like,
both in one.
Let's get it all in there.
And it's so random as well how it just pops up. It's like, oh, okay, sure.
Yeah, just has it.
Yeah, but yeah, they were probably the only other two visual things that I kind of really noted. In terms of design. I
mean, visually it looks good, doesn't it? We both like the Gotham. We both like the way they've done it with the backdrops and shooting on a parking lot.
Like, I feel like if you viewed this film just as thumbnails, I think you would inherently think, yes, that is Batman 100%. Like, visually, every shot is sort of framed in a certain way, and with the lighting and the costumes and everything, you're like, that is somebody's take on Batman.
I think it's shot really well. I actually think the way they've done it for this particular type of film it is. I think the lighting on Bruce and Batman and how well Joker's lit and just some of the bigger shots as well. I think it's framed really well. I noticed, like, with Bruce Wayne, all the shots are low down, looking up, because it's shot as if it's you're looking up at
It's
Jack,
like larger than life,
effectively.
isn't he?
It's like larger than life.
Yeah,
And it was a really well shot film. And I think that's where a lot of the praise came from, isn't it? At that point in time,
yeah,
it was just
for sure. There's one like specific shot where he's at like the bat computer thing in the bat cave, and I think he's with Vicki Vale, and they've sort of kept him completely shrouded in shadows and darkness and stuff. And that I thought was really cool. That felt very much like Batman.
Yeah,
there's a lot of that, which I think is just really, really cool.
I don't remember the Batcave was in it. My wife said to me, she said, I don't know how it came up with the Batcave. I can't remember if it's in it or not, to be honest. I remember the Batmobile being in it, and I didn't remember the Batwing being in it, but I couldn't remember him actually being in the Batcave. But obviously, it is in there with his supercomputer.
That was cool.
So,
just as a side note as well, because I've just clocked it, there's a purple coat not far from me, which isn't a Joker reference, just so you know.
Isn't it?
No, I haven't sadly got a Joker costume in the room. I should have. I should have turned up to this dressed as a Joker.
You should have just wore that coat.
I should have put it on. Yeah. God, I would have looked awesome.
Would have looked good. I think I have some Joker statues behind me, actually. Probably. Somewhere amongst the masses.
A lot of the Batman.
Awesome. Should we jump on? Do you want to do narrative or cast next? I have a lot more to say about these two things, I think.
Yes.
So.
I've got a lot to say on narrative. Should we get narrative out of the way?
Let's do it.
Okay.
All right. So the narrative, I mean, first of all, we've talked about, obviously, this film is very hugely based on two comics in particular, which is The Killing Joke, which is a lot to do with Joker's origin, basically, and Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns. So as with pretty much all these Batman films, Nolan followed on like several of these stories as well, Dark Knight Returns and Long Halloween and everything. But both these comics play a huge role. You can see in Tim Burton's mind as he's filming this. But let's go start with the narrative. You start us off.
So first thing I picked up on is when we were talking about the two criminals on the rooftop, which is very fucking theatrical. I think their dialogue is great. Like them talking about whether Batman exists or not, and it just sort of being like a load of shit. I was like, that feels like a genuine Gotham discussion. Like early Batman days, obviously, not like when he's later.
It's the same. It made me think about the Arkham games. You know, when if you're standing on top of like a gargoyle or something, you just hear the inmates like, I heard like that he comes out at this time and he does this and he does that. Yeah. Those two were
I think that's nice as well. I always like in Batman stuff when they play with kind of the rumor mill of what Batman is and what he's done to people, that kind of thing. It's one of the things that I really like with Zack Snyder's thing with the branding, in terms of like he brands criminals and what that means. I like those kind of things about Batman when there's a story about him in Gotham that isn't necessarily true, but he's built it to be true. I really like that kind of stuff. So
it's quite nice. It's early days as well. It's not like this Batman has been around for ages. They don't really dive too much into the origin of him, but he's obviously chilly. He's clearly trying to get his name out there, hence why he tells them to tell all of his friends, which is a pretty cool thing as well, because he could have just dropped him and left him hanging there, but there's a reason he has let these criminals off lightly, I guess. Yeah, it's like what broke one of their ribs and the other one's just had a talking to. I like the way the criminal looks over the roof as well at the end of that scene. He's just like, ah.
Yeah.
That was really good. What did you think about, because obviously quite early on as well, you see Harvey Dent. What did you make of that?
I love Billy D. Williams as Harvey Dent. I think that's awesome casting. I think it's a travesty that he didn't get to become Two-Face, because I think that would have been really interesting, because he's
Me too.
Like, this is sort of touching on the cast and crew stuff, but I think he's great casting for Harvey because he's inherently hard to dislike. I think because of Star Wars. I mean, as Lando, he's awesome, but he's got that sense of like, you're awesome, but I can't necessarily trust you because of Star Wars again. I mean, obviously he redeems himself, but I think as Two-Face, that would have been really cool for an audience in terms of kind of thinking, cool. Fuck, I didn't really like that guy, but bad.
I didn't really think that it was ever, I don't even know if it was ever on the cards. I think you get within the first 10 minutes, there's so many Easter eggs.
Yeah.
you see like Monarch Theatre and everything that really early on.
Yeah.
Which is actually quite. When I watched this again last night, I couldn't remember the order of how things happened. I didn't remember that they were real criminals at the beginning, because when the parents are running through the street with the boy, I thought, oh, that's Bruce and his parents. And then the woman goes, Harold. I'm like, the fuck, who's Harold? It's like, oh, they really changed it up here, because you see the Monarch Theatre straight away, but it's just kind of teasing you a little bit. But there's the Monarch Theatre, and there were a couple of other things I noticed as well. But the Harvey Dent thing for me was always just going to be, oh, they're just using the Harvey Dent name. So I didn't ever picture it going any further, but he's a big actor, isn't he? So it could have eventually, but it would have been cool to see that unfold.
I can't remember, don't spoil this for me, because we'll get there, but I can't remember if he's in Batman Returns or not. So I'm curious to see whether he pops up in that.
I don't think he is.
I know, because I remember Christopher Walken is sort of the politician part.
Yeah, that's the only thing. That's the only thing I can think of. I'm pretty sure Christopher Walken is sort of. He's not that character. He's not up for that role in Gotham. But I don't know. Actually, maybe.
Yeah,
I can't remember.
See.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Who knows? Anyway, we didn't get a Two-Face, so I was just curious, because it was so early on. It was like Harvey Dent. If you would have fully expected him to be a villain, wouldn't you, in that film at some point? But they didn't go there, so it's just a shame. Yeah. What else, Nick? Tell me more about the narrative.
One of the things I picked up early on that I'd forgotten about, and I think this is where the narrative starts to like butt heads a little bit for me. It opens up as very much like a gothic 90s, 1920s, 1930s gangster kind of film. Like the way what's his face is presented. Joker's character, which I've forgotten the name for.
Jack Napier?
Jack Napier, yeah. I should have known that just from Batman White Knight.
I know, right? It's pretty cool, isn't it? Because he's not really talked about in any of the other films as Jack Napier. So
yeah,
when I heard that yesterday, I was, oh, White Knight.
Yeah. When he's introduced, there's a lot of gangster 1920s feel to it, like the way it's shot, the way they talk. They've got a very like kind of feel to it. And watching that, I was like, oh, that's really cool to see Batman in the context of 1920s, 1930s gangster. I was like, I want to see that. And then it sort of detours and it becomes less gangster as it goes on.
Yeah, it does. You're right.
But the opening is very much like, this is it. And then it really changes pace. And I'm kind of sad a little bit that they didn't continue with that, because I think that would have been cool.
It slows down. It actually kind of starts slowing down at the what's it called, where he gets dropped into the acid tank. Where's that place called?
Ace Chemicals, yeah,
because that's a huge gangster bit, isn't it, when they're all in the office rummaging through and then they're like, pow, 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 pow.
Yeah,
that's how guns sound.
Exactly.
And then it kind of dwindles down, because Joker gets his own henchman, doesn't he? So
yeah, that starts to then just like go off, and it's a bit like, okay, sure. It works in the sense of what it is, like, but watching it back with this mind kind of going, what was this film kind of doing with the Batman character? Those opening kind of moments, I would have been like, oh, that's an interesting take on Batman. It's not necessarily just here's a new version of gangster. It's very much it just feels old school.
Do you think this is going off on a tangent anyway, but would you feel this Batman film would have worked if Joker was the main villain? Do you think it would have had as much weight to it without a Jack Nicholson Joker?
Do you know what? Right. I think there's a version of Batman which I really want to see, which I think Matt Reeves might potentially tap into a little bit in terms of how he's going. Batman's very rarely presented as the world's greatest detective in film. And I think it's because...
It has to be this Batman, doesn't it? Sorry, you're right.
Yeah. And I think it's because they obviously want Batman to be a blockbuster film. They want it to be big. And I think we get elements of it in every Batman film. Like this has moments of it, and it kind of continues to give you enough of it so you can kind of see like, oh, he's a really intelligent guy and he's got resources. But ultimately it still comes down to like these big bombastic scenes. And I think it probably wouldn't work for this because this is, the first Batman feature film. But I think there is a very cool version of a Batman film where you don't meet any major villains. He just deals with crime in Gotham. And
It'd have to be like a Calendar Man type villain, wouldn't it?
yeah, like figuring out how
Hush,
to stop crime or something, and like just taking on the crime syndicate, and then end with like the introduction of a villain or something to set up a sequel. But I think this sort of starts by almost suggesting that it's like Batman's out to clean up the city of crime, and he wants everybody to know that he's coming for it. And then it shifts gear, and it's like, actually, there's one guy who has his own gang now.
Yeah.
Sure. So yeah, so I think it would have just been different, but I think you almost needed Joker to be this because it is the first Batman film.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I don't think it works without a Joker, whether it's Jack Nicholson or not. I think I probably think it needed him, but when I was watching this, I couldn't help but think with the gangsters and everything, like you throw another villain in this without Joker and you build Joker like Nolan did with Batman Begins. I think it was a pretty big call to have Ra's al Ghul and Scarecrow as the two villains, and Matt Reeves is obviously it looks very likely that it's Penguin and Riddler as the two villains. So Penguin at least as I'd love in the Matt Reeves one Penguin to be like the villain who turns up throughout the trilogy, because that's what he's hoping to do, isn't he? Trilogy.
Yeah, I think they ultimately want to build it so it's like almost all the rogues exist at the same time.
Should be awesome.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, I think had to have Joker and Batman because at this point I guess they didn't know how well it was going to go, so this could have been the only shot.
Yeah,
because I think it was like made for 35 million, but it made about 400, 500 million. So
Jesus.
Obviously they wouldn't have known that going in, would they? Because it's one of the first big superhero films. Anyway, back to the narrative. We've gone off subject, but Joker in his. Oh, sorry, did I interrupt you?
No, it's fine. You go for it. I know what I'm going to say next, so you go for it.
Okay. Well, let me know if I skip too far ahead. But I just thought the dynamic with Joker and before his Joker, Jack Napier and his boss, that just felt very
wooden.
Yeah, just wasn't necessary either. I don't know why they had to have him be under another boss. I think he could have easily just had Joker as the main boss straight away. And again, you could have probably cut away with a lot of that stuff. Just had Jack Napier as the main mob boss, and he's going to Ace Chemicals to do a job, and it all fucks up, and he becomes the Joker. But obviously they went for it with him being underneath someone and having an affair with the main boss's wife and everything. But
because I wondered how much of that is to appeal to a movie-going audience who might not be associated with the comic books.
Yeah, probably is. I mean, it has to be. Yeah, it would be, wouldn't it? But it just felt unnecessary. We'll
sort of get to it, but as we discuss closer to the ending of the film, I think for me that's where a lot of the film falls apart, because it feels like they're doing a lot of lifting for the audience, rather than sort of adhering to what is naturally the source material or what is natural in this world. It's almost more like, okay, we really need to give the audience this sentiment now, and this is the best way and the most direct way to do it. But it doesn't land. It's sort of like, okay, I guess you've gone there, but okay. So I think I think there's some just odd choices that they kind of did, and I think that is one of them, that they feel like they have to give Joker a solid backstory.
Yeah, they have to give him a backstory. They have to give him a target to kill straight away as well, because obviously he's not going to go and kill Batman, because there's no reason to go and find Batman yet. But it's just to show that he was not willing to do the job when he was Jack Napier, but as Joker, he doesn't care, so he's just going to shoot his way to the top, basically. So I do get it, and obviously it serves a purpose, but again, I just felt like it wasn't necessarily, it didn't really, you could have just cut it out, basically.
Yeah, for sure. The one of the things that I really wanted to talk about, and it's only a little thing, but having Vicki Vale as a character, she's awesome, and I genuinely miss her in every other Batman film. Really? Like, I don't know why. I think the character of the reporter who's kind of close to Batman or tells Batman stories, I feel like it's always an interesting angle to have. And I'm always a little bit gutted when she's not there.
I just don't. Just isn't. I like Kim Basinger, and I don't mind Vicki Vale. It's just another. It just felt so rushed to get those two together in this film. Obviously, you have to. There had to be some sort of a romance and stuff. It just felt It just felt
like her story. Her storyline isn't correct for sure.
No.
I think it's just the character of her. I like this reporter who is hot on the heels of what Batman's doing. I like that kind of storyline.
I don't mind it. I'm not. I do like the film. I'm just here poking holes in it, but it just felt like it was just so quick to get her from meeting Knox to getting an invitation to this party. Then she's on a date with Bruce. Then they're dating, and then before you know it, she's clocked everything. Yeah. So just felt out of place. But I don't think Vicki Vale is. Again, that's an odd choice, isn't it, for the main lead of the female role? There's obviously they could have gone with they could have gone with other ones, but I mean there aren't that many huge female roles in the Batman comics, to be honest, other than Selena Kyle, who's in Batman Returns. But it just maybe that I don't even know if that was necessary. I don't think it was necessary to have Bruce Wayne with a love interest.
Yeah,
I feel like focused on the Batman side of things.
Yeah, I feel like that's very much like it's in there for the audience to give them a balanced film in that it's like it's not all action and people dressed up. There's a love story, that kind of thing. It feels like somebody in a Hollywood room's gone, oh, add a love story because that'll feel, good for certain audience members, and we want this to appeal to everyone.
Who does Nicole Kidman play in Batman and Robin? Is she? She's not Vicki Vale, is she? She's not another Vicki Vale.
I will check.
Was she a psychiatrist or something in it? I can't remember. I know she's in it, but I know she's a bit besotted with Val Kilmer in it. But who is she?
Good.
Because Vicki Vale isn't in Batman Returns. I remember reading specifically that they were thought she was going to come back, but then they decided not to because there were so many other people involved in the film already.
She plays.
I think.
Sorry, you continue.
No, you go. No.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say she plays Dr. Chase Meriden.
Right.
Not
of course
sure
she does.
Is she in the comics? Have I blanked?
No, I think she probably is. I can't think of what significant role she has.
Yeah.
So
don't know.
I actually thought when I first watched this, going backwards now with Jack Napier, with the mob boss's wife that he's having an affair with.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I wonder if they're going to say that her name's like Harley Quinn, but I don't think Harley Quinn was around then.
No, Harley was made for the animated
She was made in the animated series, which is in the early 90s, isn't it?
Yes.
So, but when I watched it, I thought that'd be like a strange thing if it is, and they've just made it with this other character, but it wasn't her. So,
which is really odd as well, like from a narrative point of view. Like the last time you see her character is when they show her face, I think.
Yeah, it is.
And it's like, oh shit. And I kind of got the sense, I was like, maybe she's going to be a villain as well. Like, there's something about her, but she's just never really in it.
Does anything?
Yeah. I was like, okay, sure.
Again, it's for the script, isn't it? It's to get from A to B, and then further on. Anyway, moving on. Should we dive into the acid incident with that scene?
Transformation. Yes.
So that's obviously heavily taken from the Killing Joke comic, but I think it's a pretty cool. I like the first meeting with Batman and Joker.
Yep.
With obviously Joker fully looking like he's lucky to get away with it, and then he turns around and tries to shoot, and it backfires on him and everything, and then he's in. It's a really odd thing that Batman doesn't actually keep him up.
Yeah.
But again, and that's odd as well. It's the same shot of Batman, just a higher frame of it for when he's holding on to Joker, Ace Chemicals, and at the end.
Yeah.
So they've reused a few different shots as well.
Yeah, his transformation is cheesy, but I think it works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so as well. I think most of this film is cheesy, isn't it? But a lot of it works.
Yeah.
There's so much things like with the end with the parade with all the balloons and stuff. Like, how did he get that together? That's mental.
It's bizarre.
How did he do it?
I still really like the visual of like Joker's hand coming out of the acid. It's super cheesy and it's very Tim Burton. but
Yes.
I think it's a cool look.
Also reminds me of the end of Arkham Asylum with the hand coming out of the water.
Yeah, and Terminator. But
And Terminator.
But this was predating Terminator, because Terminator 2 was the early 90s. And
Terminator 2 stole it.
With the thumb. I think that's very cool. And I think, as much as Suicide Squad's awful, there's a better version of it out there. I believe in the air cut.
We have to say that, so Harry's happy.
Yes. No, I really like in that it's a similar vibe of the shot of him holding Harley and there's like the colours swirling and stuff. I kind of like that, just sort of as a nod to this transition. I like that you kind of see that in a similar way. So yeah, so I think the Joker transformation works. I think it's just
me too.
Easy. Continuing on from like the Joker kind of transformation scene, I think one of the best kind of representations of the Joker in this is the TV scene.
Yes, it's good, isn't it?
I think that's awesome. I
love that as well. It's quite unnerving as well for Bruce Wayne, isn't it?
Yeah, it's so good. It's so well done and leans into that kind of uncomfortable Joker vibe.
Because he looks so happy and just carefree as well.
Yeah.
You're just like, what is he up to? Or what is going to happen next?
And like,
so
obviously,
cool.
Some of Joker's dialogue, there's always the big one, which is the dance in the pale moon, like kind of line. I think some of Joker's dialogue is great. There's some which is like so over the top, ridiculous.
Some big one-liners, though, aren't there? What was the one that I didn't write it down? But there's one quite after he's turned into Joker. He's sitting in the office and he's got his feet on the chair. That's not the Moonlight one.
Is that the wait till they get a load of me?
Yes. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
That
that's
again
a good line.
Feels like a 1920s, 1930s gangster.
Yeah, it does.
Like, I could imagine somebody saying that in like an Al Capone film, being like, wait till they get a load of me, and then somebody getting shot with a Tommy gun. He does have some really cool lines. There's around the pale moonlight line, there's the really shifty dialogue, which I've never quite understood, and it gets memed a lot. But it's Bruce Wayne going, "You want to get nuts?" Never sure.
I think of that.
It just sort of comes out of nowhere. And I know Bruce is technically like unstable in some way because he dresses up as a bat and hits people. But to grab a fire poker and then just go, "You want to get nuts," really loudly is very odd. Again, I guess it's that theatrical.
Do you think it's to show? No, because that wouldn't make sense. I was going to say, do you think it's to show that he's scared, so he couldn't possibly be Batman?
Yeah, I don't know. I wasn't sure whether they were trying to say that, which I think it obviously is done way better later on, but they're two sides of the same coin. That it's like the Joker's one side and Batman's the other, but they're both equally nuts.
Yeah.
And I wasn't sure if that's what it was trying to say, is that it's like...
Maybe there is no logic behind it, though. Maybe it was just Michael Keaton probably had a lie, and he was like, "Do you want to get nuts?" And then they were like, "That works." Yeah, we trusted him with the "I'm Batman" line, and that worked out well. So let's keep this one in.
That is very bizarre. And then,
it is a meme, isn't it, all the time?
Yeah. The big thing that I've kind of touched on, which I'm now going to go into, that really I don't like and doesn't work for me at all in any way, is that Joker's the one that kills the Waynes. That doesn't land at all. That feels like the thing that was put in for a Hollywood audience to be like, that's why we don't like him.
Yeah, it doesn't work. It doesn't work at all, really. But again, probably when I first saw it, I didn't care as much. I think it was like,
definitely,
motherfucker, he was the one who did it. But
yeah.
Now when you you know so much history about it, and I've read and you've read so much about the character and the Joker and backstory of Bruce Wayne, everything, it doesn't make sense, does it? It's so much better as just a normal criminal.
Yeah, it does its job, like
criminal.
In the sense that I think when you haven't seen it or you're not aware of Joe Chill, it does its job in that it does convey the emotion that you're like, you fucker. But knowing the Joe Chill storyline and knowing the history there, it does feel like you're a bit like, oh, that's convenient. And I think it I think this version, especially like Tim Burton's version, would have actually benefited from having a Joe Chill character, like leaning into the idea that the Wayne's murder was just a random occurrence in Gotham because Gotham is just out of control.
Yeah.
I think it really would have played well. I think for an audience that are just getting adjusted to Batman in terms of a cinematic Batman, I think the Joker killing the parents, I guess, makes sense because it just hammers home he's the villain. But yeah,
Also closes it off, doesn't it? If of course, Batman's looking to like redeem Gotham City and make it a better place, but obviously because at the end Joker does die, it's like okay, like
yeah, it's justified.
Job done, and obviously in the comics and stuff, Joker never ever goes, and it doesn't matter. I mean, yes, Batman, the person that is responsible for his parents' death, is caught, but it just doesn't feel right that it's Joker.
Yeah.
But yes, it's service for the Hollywood audience, isn't it? Basically,
pretty much.
So
yeah, it just doesn't. It never lands with me, and it's always the kind of thing that I'm like, ugh, I kind of wish.
It feels like we're being quite negative. It feels hard. It's easy to talk about the bad things, isn't it? And then sometimes the good things with a lot of this stuff, as with generally when you talk about anything. But
gotcha.
There is a lot of good stuff. Like I do with the narrative as well. I do like that it's Batman versus Joker. Of course, I like Batman versus Joker. I like that there is a lot of Bruce Wayne stuff compared to actually Batman stuff in it as well, isn't there? So there's a lot of stuff for Michael Keaton to go through and unpack, and there isn't that much Batman stuff in the middle, really.
No, there also isn't a lot of like, which I really respect. There isn't a lot of like Batman fighting.
No, there isn't, which is pretty crazy, isn't it, for a big blockbuster as well? Because he does a lot of his stuff. The Batwing is like his most action-packed stuff, and then both the beginning scene with the two criminals on the roof and the end scene on the cathedral, it's quite limited, isn't it? It's just a bit of this and a bit of that. But I think there's definitely more of that in Batman Returns. That there's a lot more. I mean, the opening scene for Batman Returns in the snow in the central Gotham City with all these clowns jumping around. There's more action in that than I think there probably is in the most of this film.
Yeah, this one
is heavily based on Joker theatrics, isn't it? This one, that's
I think
the key to it, and like Michael Keaton observing like the fuck is going on with this guy.
Yeah,
he's nuts.
He is.
But I really do think the story is fine for what it is.
Gotcha. As like a piece of film, I think the only reason I'm somewhat critical is, having read so much Batman now, in my head I sort of have a Batman storyline that I'm like, these are the things I need from Batman. But letting all of that go and just watching it as like just purely a film, everything works. Like nothing is
definitely
like this is broken.
It'd be interesting to read reviews, wouldn't it, from then, like from 1989, 1990, like how it felt then, because obviously there would have been huge comic fans reviewing this film, and there would have been people that had no idea about comic reviews. And obviously, I think if you go off like something like Rotten Tomatoes, it's high up there. It's like 70s, 80s, maybe. But obviously, some of those reviews can come a bit later. But like you said, as a film itself, it works, and I think it's strong in the beginning, and the middle is fine with a lot of the Joker stuff, and the end is good for what it is as well. Yeah, so
it's also not like if you didn't know those things about Harvey Dent, or like you just didn't know much about the Batman mythology, it still all works. You don't feel like any characters caught of like, oh, why weren't they giving enough time or whatever. Like, as a huge Jim Gordon fan, Jim Gordon in this is a bit
shit.
Yeah, just who cares? But in the sense of the film, he does the job. Like he does.
He just have a good line at the beginning though. I love that bit when Batman's watching him in the Batcave, and he says, the police officer's like, "Oh, it's the bad cop, the crooked cop, whatever his name is."
Oh, Knox? No,
Knox. No, not Knox. Yeah, Knox is the reporter, isn't it?
Yeah,
I've got his name written down here because I thought I did anyway.
I always think it's Bullock, but it's not, is it?
Not Bullock.
But it looks exactly like he would play a good Bullock, but he's not. It's really weird.
Anyway, that guy that's a bad guy.
That dude.
Eckhart,
yes.
So Eckhart, and he's just like, who's learning the operation at Ace Chemicals? And the police officer's like, it's Eckhart. And he's like, dear God. Like, If he's that fucking bad, get rid of him.
Yeah.
Like, you're asking for trouble if you're letting him have a territory in Gotham City. So, but he does it such like it's not unconvincing, but it's just so dramatic, theatrical, as you would say in this film. Dear God.
Yeah,
So,
there are a lot of pieces of dialogue like that. Like, I really like Eckhart's line earlier on, where it's sort of like just this hard-boiled detective who's like, don't really give a shit. And he's like trying to play down the Batman. He's like, I'll just say those two slipped on a banana skin. And it's like, cool, good.
Yeah,
I like that. That's what you're telling a reporter, kind of thing.
Eckhart is just such a shit.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't know who the actor is and whatever he's been after, but I couldn't even understand him for the first like 2 minutes of him talking. He was like, I was like, right, okay.
Again, though, that is very 1920s, 1930s game.
Yes. And then conveniently, he walks around the corner and there's Jack Napier.
Yeah, just hanging out.
Just hanging out. No one else at the scene. Of course, it's just another small hole when I'm trying to praise things as well, but now I can't help but not praise it. What did you think of the ending? Did you?
Yeah, I think the ending works. I think it's cool. I think it's bold that they kill Joker. Like, as much as I'm sad that that it means he can't be in a sequel or he's not existing in that world anymore, I think that makes it interesting. And again, looking forward to the Flash. How do you pick up with Batman that much later on? Unless he pops in and it's like in between Batman 89 and Returns, which would be really weird, or after Returns or whatever. But if you've got an older Keaton who's the older Batman, how has Batman's career as a detective been without Joker?
Yeah, like, what it's interesting, isn't it?
So I think that it's a bold decision, especially with like the first film that you go, fuck it, Joker's dead.
But again, they probably didn't know they were going to get another shot at it, did they? If it was going to go bust. They're heavily banking on Jack Nicholson's name, I think, to get this
go
over the line. Actually, when I watched it today, I was like, did Joker die at the end? Because I remember him laughing, but I assumed he died when I was younger, definitely, and probably as a teenager. I think somewhere, but I was just like, ambiguous. Oh, is it? Did he or didn't he die? Because when I watched it, I was like, oh, maybe he had something on him. Maybe that was what was making the laughing noise, but it wasn't. It came from him, didn't it?
Yeah, it looks
stuck on the loop.
The way it's shot, though, it does look like they're holding something that's laughing, right? Because they pull out the thing from his pocket or whatever it is, and the laugh kind of continues. And I was like, "What are they?"
I have no idea.
It is odd, but yeah, I thought that was bold, and I thought it works. I like the whole cathedral thing. That again feels very gothic, very very much in line with Gotham,
which was rewritten. Like I said, that was they changed that. I think I was reading a few articles on it, and because they didn't know what was going to happen at the end, they knew they were shooting at a cathedral like set, and there was a scene where Jack Nicholson was going up the stairs at the cathedral, and he turned around to someone, like I think it must have been Tim Burton, and said like, "Where am I going?" And Tim Burton was like, "I don't know yet," because they hadn't finished what was going to happen at the top.
Interesting.
So they knew it was going to end on a rooftop, but they didn't know why it was going to end on a rooftop and why Jack Nicholson was running up some stairs. So, anyway, but it worked. I thought it was good. I mean, the whole film, I enjoyed the whole film, like we said. Like we could, I'm sure we could go in depth scene by scene by scene, but obviously that would be a very, very long podcast. Yeah. But overall, I really liked it. I mean, should we say what would you give it out of 10? What would you
out of the consistently rating?
Out of the consistently rating.
Do you know what? I will give it a consistently rating of an 8.
Yeah, I would give it 8 as well.
You know, I think it is really good as a piece of cinema. I think visually it's amazing. I think the narrative
is a strong number.
Yeah, and I think the narrative is what I gave WandaVision. I think the narrative works in the sense of Batman. I think if you haven't encountered Batman before, it's a great film to start with because it does sort of give you the nuts and bolts of the character. I think it's just as you acclimatize to more Batman material, whether it's comics, animation, video games, or whatever, I think that's where it has its downfall, but that's almost more because of the time it was made. Like we're looking back on it with so much bloody Batman material.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it is a solid 8 for me. How about you?
Yeah, no, me too. Yeah, I would say about an 8, which is I'm looking forward to watching Batman Returns next, and this being the next in-depth one we do, because I remember seriously liking Batman Returns.
Yeah, me too.
So I wonder if it holds up, because I loved Danny DeVito's Penguin. I loved Michelle Pfeiffer as Catwoman. And I think by then I'd really, like, even at a young age, I'd grown attached to Michael Keaton as Batman. But again, it's one of those films that I've watched a lot growing up.
Yeah.
But probably definitely not watched it in the last 10 years or so.
Yeah.
And since then, a lot has happened in my film, comic, reading life. So
going off of that as well, as our last topic is cast and crew, which we touched on here and there. I think just kind of quick fire, go through it. Casting Keaton as Batman and Bruce, I think is great. I mean, like, he's a good Batman, but I think he's an awesome Bruce Wayne.
He's funny, isn't he, as Bruce?
Yeah.
He gets it right. And I think that's probably why Tim Burton probably lobbied quite hard for him, because of the way he was a Beetlejuice. I think they know he could pull off. I think the difficulty, again, from what I've read, is that they had no problem with him as Bruce, but there was the worry that he wasn't structurally big enough for Batman, but also he couldn't pull off someone that serious. But he, again, with the way it was shot and the lighting and stuff and the suit itself, I think he pulled it off just as well as, any other Batman, really, apart from Val Kilmer's an okay Batman, but George Clooney didn't really work too well because he wasn't intimidating at all.
He was great though.
He was, he was the best, obviously.
He is Batman.
But he is Batman. Damn you, Nick, growing up too late. But I think it was really good in the end. And there was a list of actors that were on the short list. I can't remember who they were now, but he was, there was no reason for him not to get it. Whereas, Jack Nicholson, I read how much Robin Williams wanted the role for Joker. Easily.
Yeah, I've heard that before.
Easily, Robin Williams could have done a really good job with that Joker role as well, and it would have been so interesting to see his take on it. But at the same time, Jack Nicholson was a huge name at that point, wasn't he? He'd just done things like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and everything. And big name.
He is great as Joker again, like leading into
he's great.
Like, even though, like, I have problems with the narrative of him, which I think is I can never work out whether that's his performance or whether it's the way that his character is written. But if that is how he's written, he does exactly what's on the page. He nails it.
I feel like he did what was on the. I think he's obviously thrown a few things in there as well, but I think he's just generally the way how good of an actor he is and the way he can get those theatrics across his Joker. I think he's just like, this is fine. I can pull this off, and I'm going to do it, and I'm going to turn it up to 10 just because. I can, and I'll make it work, because like I said at the beginning, like, for him to play that role must have taken it's probably so different to what he had been doing in a way that I guess not. I guess some of his roles before he probably would have got some inspiration from them, but I think I said it as well at the beginning that he said he'd take a pay cut to do the role if he got a share of the merchandise sales, which wise. I think he dropped like X amount of million, but he gained like X amount of million more because he got the merchandise sales. But also he had a contract that he would only shoot on his time in X amount of hours a day for his shots. So he would pick when he got to be part of the shoot, basically. But I think he was very good about it. He got every LA Lakers game off as well, so he wouldn't be on set for the LA Lakers game.
Classic.
I don't think this is like an ego thing. As what I read, it was an ego thing. It was just because of what the role was. I'm like, if it bombed, then
he hadn't invested.
He hadn't invested so much into it, and he had these things in place and everything. So but he pulled it off. I thought, so Mike Keegan was great. I thought Jack Nicholson was great as Joker.
There are like some scenes as well with Nicholson where, like, I know they've become like, again, memes or gifs, but the scene where he like says to the guy, like, "You're my number one guy," is uncomfortable. That I like it because I'm like, is he gonna kill the guy? What's he gonna do? But there's like a respect thing there, and I quite like it. It's done in a very theatrical, dramatic kind of way, but I do like that, and I think that is really a testament to his performance, because it's like the long pauses that sort of add the dramatic nature to it. I think that's
because his boss says it to him at the beginning, doesn't it? That's why it's even more uncomfortable, because of what happens. Like he says it, and then he basically puts Jack Nicholson or Joker in the firing line of the police. So when he says it's his number 2, it's kind of like, oh, this guy's fucking lunatic. He's probably just going to put a bullet in your head right now.
Yeah.
So so it's good. I thought both the big casting was really well done by obviously the producers and the casting people and everything. So I mean, there isn't that much. I mean, Kim Basinger was very good as Vicki Vale for what she did do, although I don't think she was really needed. But again, it was fine. She did the role well, and all the small roles, again, because it wasn't so focused on like Commissioner Gordon and stuff. They just kind of fell into the background, and they would just fillers, weren't they?
I think Michael Goff
didn't really do much.
Alfred's great. I like his Alfred. He's very like mild-mannered Alfred, and I think you'd struggle to do that version of Alfred again because he did it really well. Like
it's evolving the roles, isn't it? Though, like we said with Joker, like Michael Caine is a completely different Alfred, and you can imagine that you're going to get an Alfred from Andy Serkis. That's probably a more hands-on Alfred, and like Alfred in the Snyder Cut.
Like Jeremy Irons.
Jeremy Irons. He's a completely different Alfred, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's polite, making tea, but he's also building a fucking Batwing or whatever he was building.
Yeah, gauntlet shit.
But other than that, I mean, Knox was good, wasn't he? I don't know who the actor is, but the guy who played him,
a fair few things. Yeah, he's good.
Was very good as well, and good comedic timing and everything. So, I mean, the main casting there is, I mean, there's a huge amount of casting with Danny DeVito and stuff, and Batman Returns. But this one, your two main guys, aren't they? It's
it's very much
Batman
like a
and
two-header.
Jack Nicholson as Joker, and that was his other thing. He wanted top billing as well, which is why. I didn't read this until last night, but that's why it's Jack Nicholson first and not Michael Keaton, which is obviously strange because the film's called Batman. The guy who plays Batman isn't billed first on the casting list.
Bizarre, but sure.
Jack.
Also, as we're on cast and crew, we mentioned Tim Burton and what he'd kind of done before, but score-wise, Danny Elfman.
Danny Elfman. Tim Burton's number 1, isn't it?
Yep. Smashed
I really like the music. That was when I watched it. When I put it on, because I had to watch the beginning 3 times because I've got 2 kids, Nick, and they're just, they do what they want. But that music is great. That's such a good Batman intro.
Opening titles are so long as well. It's like
they are so long.
I watched it and I was like, Jesus, this is really going for it.
And a bunch of people I've never heard of, actors or actresses. It's just like Brian McDougal. Like, I don't know who you are, Brian McDougal. That's not a name on the casting, but it feels like, just a bunch of names. It was Jack Nicholson, Mike Keaton, Kim Basinger, this person, Lando. It
just keeps going. But strong.
Strong stuff. I really think this first film really set the tone for the second film, which I really think is even better than this one. So I'm really looking forward to watching that.
Yeah.
So that's going to wrap up our in-depth on Batman 89. Obviously, as we said at the beginning of the podcast, this is going to be a monthly thing where we go in-depth further into Batman. So the next one, as we've said a million times during this episode, is going to be Batman Returns. And we'll have a special guest. We'll have Neil from Get Your Comic On. He'll be joining us for the Batman Returns episode and going in depth. So our next episode will be out in 2 weeks. We're going to focus on the comic writer Tom King, who's written things like Sheriff of Babylon. He's written a lot of Batman. He's currently writing Batman Catwoman. He's writing Strange Adventures. We're both big fans of his, aren't we, Nick?
Oh my God, yes. I'm so excited to gush over Mr. Miracle. I feel like that's been a long time
Mr.
coming.
Miracle. That's going to be a whole podcast just on that. But he's a fantastic writer. If you've not read anything and you're going to tune in for that podcast, try and get some of his comic work in before you do, because we're going to go into that and we're really looking forward to it because it's one we've wanted to do for ages. So that's what we're going to do. And then obviously we'll follow up that with the next in-depth, which will be on Batman Returns. Thanks everyone. If you've enjoyed listening to us, you can find us across social media, Twitter, Instagram at ConsistentlyPod. And you can also follow us on YouTube where we have all our episodes uploaded there as well, by simply searching for Consistently OK Podcast. We stream on all podcast providers and each episode comes out on Wednesdays. If you are an Apple listener as well, you can subscribe there for extra content. You can hear a bit more from me and Nick, and we'll do wraps up some other things we've been interested in over the last few weeks. So I think that's everything. Just a reminder before we do go that we do have a sponsor for this episode, which is Heart Vehicle Contracts, where they sell new and used cars, and you can find them at www.heartvehiclecontracts.com. Thanks a lot, Nick. Enjoyed that.
Cheers, dude. Good to start this series off.
Good start to the in-depth series.
Yeah.
So we'll talk soon.
Sweet. Catch you in a bit.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.